Hello, everyone. This is the Reverend, and according to my wife, I am the world's strongest and nerdiest preacher. What are your thoughts? Let's get into the video. Today, we're going to talk about some of my personal experiences with cryptids and the paranormal. 3 Bigfoot sightings and 1 of the Mothman. Well, let's get into it. The first sighting happened in 2002, 2003. I was still a pretty young man. I'm not even an adult yet at that point, actually. I was fishing out at a local lake, and I was walking through the woods from one fishing point to another and came across this thing. Maybe 10 feet away at most. Like right in front of me. If I took 2 steps and kicked, I could have kicked him in the balls. And yes, it was a male. I could see the twig and berries. So, I was that close. I could see his nuts. If this was a suit, this was the best suit I have ever seen. Especially with the stilts they were having to use. Now, let me tell you something about myself. I stopped growing at 12 years old. I'm 6'5", about 400 pounds. At this point, I was 6'5" and about 270 pounds. Well, this thing was over a foot taller than me. Bare minimum 18 inches taller. Possibly 2 feet, but bare minimum 18 inches. Well, let's figure out the math. 6'5" plus 12 inches, well, that puts you up to 7'5". Add another 6, that's 7 feet 11 inches. Bare minimum. 1 inch off of being 8 feet tall. There is nobody in Ohio that tall. And I could see this thing's nuts. Like, I could see its dong and its balls. Don't want to tell you how important that is. You're not going to put that in a suit. Who in their right mind is going to go through that much detail on a suit? Now, this was the closest I've ever been to one of these creatures. But it was close, and it stunk. It smelled like somebody pissed on a skunk. That's what it smelled like. Somebody urinated on a skunk right after it sprayed. It was that bad. I'd been smelling something off the whole day that I'd been fishing. I'd been fishing for about 4 hours already at that point. Maybe 5. Mind you, this is almost 20 years ago. So, if not 20. I was a teenager at the time. Let's go into number 2. I had just gotten married to my first wife. That did end in a biblical way. She committed adultery, so let's just not get into that. Well, I'm sitting just on our back porch. Very nice night, beginning of fall, September. The corn was still up. Hadn't been cut yet. It might have been earlier, it might have been summertime, I can't quite remember. But it was a cool night, and the corn was grown. Well, I saw somebody walking through the cornfield. I'm thinking, probably the farmer. He's a pretty big guy. He's almost as tall as I am. He's like 6'2". Pretty big guy. Well, the next day I walked over to the cornfield just because I was kind of curious, and I didn't see any footprints or anything, but I did notice the corn was about 6 to 8 inches taller than me. Now, I didn't know that at the time when I had the sighting. Didn't know till the next day. The corn came up to this guy's nipples at the highest, like middle of the chest. He had another foot or more of height, probably closer to 2 feet to be honest, above this corn that was 7 feet tall. That puts it at around 9 feet. Over 8 feet, but around 9. My estimate would be like 8'8" to 9'2". I was a pretty far distance away, but I could tell how much of this guy was over that. That's not a human. Unless somebody's walking through that field with stilts, it wasn't a human. Bigfoot sighting number 3. This one happened a few years later. I'd hit on hard luck and I was homeless. Well, I was living in a tent and I'm walking to my tent and I get ready to head down in the woods and see something standing beside my tent. And I say something because it was a very bright night, huge full moon. And I look and it just looks at me. It's no taller than I am. I'm probably a couple inches taller. It wasn't even as tall as my tent at the time. Its fur was very, very light, a gray or whitish. It wasn't pure white, but it wasn't a gray either. Somewhere in between. Just looks at me, pauses for a second, and bolts. Maybe 15, 20 feet away from it. The next day, there were footprints beside my tent. Now, I wear a size 16 4E shoe. They were almost the same size as my footprints. Probably a 15 quadruple E. Now, that's really big for a person. Especially a person who's barefoot and in a suit. And it would have been a really good suit, too. Now, I'm not going to argue that this couldn't have been a person in a suit. That is fully possible. But if it was an individual in a suit, this suit would have cost $2,000 or $3,000. It was that good. Now, I didn't get a view of any nuts or anything like I did on the first one, but it was a good suit. Let's talk about Mothman now. I've only had one sighting of the Mothman. It happened in probably 2011. Again, I'm sitting at the same place I was roughly when I saw the Bigfoot in the cornfield. I'm just on the opposite side of my home at the time. I'm on the front porch instead of the back. And I noticed these eyes about 40, 50 feet away. I start walking. I get up and I start walking towards it because I'm thinking it's an owl. It's red eye shine. That's the only thing in this area that has red eye shine is an owl. But as I'm getting closer, I notice that it's not in the trees. It's not in the tree line. It's about 10, 15 feet away from the trees. And then I see the silhouette. This thing was over 7 feet tall. The eyes were massive, too big to be an owl. And it jumps up and just flies off, completely silent. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, owls can fly silently. That's true. But I could see this thing squat down and jump up. And the squatting down motion took it from 7 feet to 4 feet and then jumped up. Now, an owl pushing down on a limb and jumping up is not going to have a 3-foot difference in height like somebody who's squatting to half their height and then jumping with force is going to do. And that's what this was. This was something that squatted down to about half its height to get a power jump in. I've never seen anything like that since, and I really don't want to again. A couple of seconds later, my wife touched me on the shoulder, my ex-wife, to see what I was doing. And I think she had gotten to the door when I reached that area. And that's why it left, because I got a sense that this was not a friendly entity, a friendly creature. I got the sense that it did mean me harm the closer I got. I don't know if it did or didn't. I have no way to prove that. It ran off. But I have a feeling that if she hadn't have come out when she did, I wouldn't be telling you this story now. I hope you all have a great day.